It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All the sports news you need every day in under 20 minutes. Follow Locked On today on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome into Locked On Knicks. Alex Wolf and Gavin Shaw here. And today, I don't know what we're calling this, Gavin, a news dump. We've got a lot of stuff to get into that has come out over the last few days.
Yeah, Alex, we're talking Knicks schedule and why the beginning and ends are extremely favorable. In the middle might provide some trouble for our Knicks. Then we talk about a Mark Berman story on one of our favorite Suns, Mitchell Robinson. And finally, NBA over-unders are out, why you should be pounding the over on the New York Knicks, and some other odds and props we like going into next season for the Knicks and other teams. All that and more right now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And I think we see Willis coming out. There he comes right now.
Starks without a five. Ewing for the win. Yes.
Up left. Now fires it. He's good. And he's fouled.
Anthony for three. Bang! That one goes down. This is all about back up off the glass. It's good.
Becomes infectious.
All right, welcome into Locked On Knicks. Today's episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com and tell them Locked On sent you. I am Alex Wolf. I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site, The Strickland, which you can find at thestrick.land. He is Gavin Shaw, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster, getting ready to do some high school football, I would assume. Lots of that coming up. And we today are talking about professional basketball, as we typically do. And Gavin, I think the big news is the schedule released for the Knicks. And I mean, I was saying to you before we started recording, it's kind of weird looking at a schedule and being like, oh, damn, this is like a really favorable stretch for the Knicks. Like, oh, like win. Like this. I feel really good about this schedule, and I don't know how to feel about that. But like as I was looking it over, there's a lot of winnable games for the Knicks on this. Like I think that they're in a pretty good spot where finally, after so long, you know, their division isn't this like horrible gauntlet that's going to be impossible to traverse. And I think that's probably when I was just thinking about it, I think that's probably the biggest thing with the schedule now is that the Atlantic Division is not like world beaters anymore. Like the Celtics look flawed for sure, and they looked flawed last year. And if anything, they got worse by most people's opinions. And then the Raptors are kind of in a rebuild now, lost Kyle Lowry. And then obviously you still have, you know, Philly at the top, but everything is kind of in tumult with them right now. We don't know what's going to happen with Ben Simmons. There's been reports that like Ben Simmons might not even suit up for them this year. Like he might insist on being traded before even reporting to training camp or whatever. And apparently they've been shopping him. So who knows what their team's going to look like. And of course you have the Nets, which, you know, all those games will be really tough. But like, it's pretty nice having Boston and Toronto finally sort of, I would say, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I kind of think, regardless of what pundits are saying about like the Celtics maybe being able to rebound, I think on paper and based off of results last year, I feel pretty confident saying that like, I think the Knicks are better than those two teams and are probably I would say the third best team in the division, which is not something that could have even remotely been said for the last number of years where they've been like without a doubt the fifth quote unquote best team in the division. They've been the worst team in the division for like almost forever leading up to last year. So, I mean, what are some of your general thoughts on the schedule early on here?
Yeah, I think quickly to your point on the Celtics and Raptors, they're going to be good, but it's so weird. It's hard to tell how good just because how much the rest of the Eastern Conference has improved. I'll say this: if Jason Tatum makes a jump to be as good as he should be, the Celtics could still get a top 4 seed. Like he would be pretty clearly the best non-Nets player in the. Oh no, Joel Embiid. But anyways, he would be the best player on between the Knicks and the Celtics. Anyways, so I think that's Boston's avenue for being better than the Knicks. I love Time Lord. Peyton Pritchard, Aaron Naismith looked a bit improved in Summer League. Schroeder, I think, is clearly a downgrade from Kemba, but I do think they almost desperately needed to land someone like that. And Al Horford, obviously, decent backup center. So I don't know. I think I put the Celtics and the Knicks about in the same category. The Raptors, I would be a lot more afraid of if they had taken Jalen Suggs over Scotty Barnes. And not to say that was necessarily the wrong pick. Barnes down the road could be really, really good, but I think Suggs is certainly the guy more ready to contribute and would have been, if not a 1-to-1 replacement for Kyle Lowry, provide some new elements for them. That would have been fascinating. As it stands, they're going to be an annoyance to play, to put it kindly, but the Knicks should be better. Anyways, the schedule in general. So going over it, Alex, I kind of divided it into, I think, 3 different segments that will ultimately define their season. The first 18 games, I think it's essential that the Knicks are sitting as a top 4 seed after the first 18 games. There's not really an excuse for them not to be. Just 4 of their first 18 are against teams that were top 4 seeds a season ago, and just 6 of their 18 teams that they play in the first 18 games made the playoffs a year ago, meaning 12 of the 18 are lottery teams. So it's just pretty ripe for the Knicks to build and win a lot of games. And sometimes you'll hear people say stuff like that about a schedule and it'll be like, all right, but look how much those teams improved. Not really the case for the Knicks. 2 of their first 3 games against the Orlando Magic. Then you have the Bulls, who I think everyone is overrating. I don't think the Bulls are going to be very good this year. New Orleans, another team, I'll bring this up later. I think they're going to be particularly bad, and I think things are going to go really, really bad there. Then you have Toronto, very winnable. Indiana, good, but the Knicks should be better than them. Milwaukee, very tough, obviously. Cleveland, very winnable. And then you finish up that stretch with the 4-game run of Charlotte, Indiana, Orlando, Houston, or 5-game, Chicago. So 5 games that the Knicks very much should win. So it's going to come down to how quickly this Knicks team comes together. And I'm pretty confident it happens fairly fast just because of Kemba Walker's experience level, his ability to, I think, acclimate very quickly to a new environment, his presumed comfort playing at MSG, given what he did in high school, given what he did in college. Evan Fournier, I think, another guy that will make a very quick transition. And just the fact that all their pieces fit so well together, I think will allow things to acclimate fast, and that easy schedule will sort of accommodate that process. Where things get kind of tricky and why you have to build that cushion early on is from February 2nd to March 6th, 11 of their 13 games are against playoff teams. The 2 non-playoff teams they play in that stretch are the Oklahoma City Thunder, should be a pretty easy one, and the Golden State Warriors. Very, very, very tough. And a lot of those games are out west as well. So you also have the road element. And in particular, I'm looking at, if my computer will scroll down, a road trip where you have from February 5th through February 12th, Los Angeles, Utah, Denver, Golden State, Portland. So if the Knicks it's sort of analogous, I think, to like the 6-game Western swing that culminated in that brutal loss to the Lakers the Knicks had at the end of last season. That reminds me of that. But then you come back home, you get OKC, so a little bit of a break, but then Brooklyn, Miami, Philly, at Phoenix, at Clippers. So it's a tough 5-game stretch and then a brutally tough 6-game stretch to end that run. I
want to talk about too. Sorry if I may interrupt.
Yeah.
That 6-game stretch you just mentioned too, the Brooklyn, Miami, Philly, at Phoenix, at Clippers, all nationally televised games in a row.
Wow.
They're going to have 6 straight nationally televised games. That is a shit ton of pressure. Like that is a lot to deal with, man. I mean, people were making a fuss about the Knicks having so many national TV games, to which I just want to be like, biggest market in the world, like arguably with a team that was just a 4 seed last year that got better this offseason. Like, why wouldn't they get lots of nationally televised games? But I almost wish they didn't have them, particularly for that stretch. I mean, that's so much pressure. I mean, I know that, like, you know, every game is the same or whatever, but having to play on national TV 6 times in a row and like knowing that that's the case, especially when then 3 of them come on the road. And I mean, they're not like back-to-backs or anything, but it is only 1 day of rest between each, including some West Coast travel. So like they're going to be at Philly and then 2 days later in Phoenix playing, and then 2 days later playing the Clippers. And then the next day after that game, a potential trap game, they're going to have to go from a 4:30 start Eastern time versus the Clippers to then coming home for a back-to-back the next night against Sacramento. I mean, that's not fantastic either. So that's potential trap game there. I mean, yeah, I'm sorry, not home against Sacramento. It's at Sacramento. I don't know why it looked like home to me for a sec. But so they're playing a back-to-back at Sacramento the next day, and then also have to hit Dallas, Memphis, and then finish off in Brooklyn on national TV again to finish that stretch. So yeah, I mean, just horribly brutal stretch there. I think that's probably going to be their season-defining stretch. Like, as hard as that 5-game West Coast swing is, I think that this one that starts with, it basically starts and ends with Brooklyn. So it starts with Brooklyn on February 16th, ends with Brooklyn on March 13th, basically a month. That's going to be a rough stretch for them during this like latter part of the season here. Luckily, they get some kind of cream puff games to end with, but it's not super pretty.
Yeah, so you were referencing it though, but they'll be able to make up some ground if they lose some ground there, because the end of the year is really forgiving and also not a lot of travel. They played their last game against a Western Conference opponent on March 20th at home against the Jazz. They play their last road game against a Western Conference opponent on March 11th. So that's pretty favorable for the Knicks. And then they finish up those final 10 games at Detroit, Chicago, Charlotte, Cleveland, at Orlando, Brooklyn, Washington, Toronto. So if you're counting just 3 playoff teams from last year, and one of them is the Wizards. So that is very doable. By April 6th, Brooklyn could have the 1 seed well locked up. They might be resting 2 or 3 of their big stars. I just think that's a fantastic opportunity for the Knicks to similar to last season, Alex. They could be the 8th seed going into that stretch, and things could be so condensed they could work their way all the way up to home court advantage if things roll their way.
Yeah, I think that could potentially be on the docket. It might have me sweating a little bit down the stretch, though, Gavin, and I think that's where we should talk about Sweat Block for today. This episode is brought to you by Sweat Block, and these wipes have been a real lifesaver for me. I'm a huge sweater, as I've said during these ad spots before. You know, it's anywhere from, you know, doing athletics. I'm always the guy that, like, if I play pickup basketball and I go to post someone up, they put the hand on my back, and then I can hear like a audible ugh, you know, and I'll be out just with friends, and, you know, especially this time of year when it's like 80% humidity every day, just kills me, makes me sweat like mad. And it can be embarrassing sometimes, you know, especially on the days when it's not hot enough for the non-sweaty people to sweat, and I'm still sweating anyway. It makes me very self-conscious. I'm always wearing dark clothes to cover it up. It's just not great. And that's where Sweat Block wipes come in. They're doctor created, doctor recommended. They work for up to 7 days per use, and they come with a dry shirt guarantee. If Sweat Block doesn't keep you dry, you get your money back. They've been featured and tested on The Rachel Ray Show by firefighters. They've been the bestseller on Amazon for the past 10 years with over 13,000 reviews, and they're manufactured in the USA. I mean, these things have been fantastic for me. I put them on my underarms. I can even put it on my upper body in general, because I just tend to sweat everywhere. And it stops me from sweating and stops me from having to have those embarrassing moments where my shirt is just soaked for no good reason, because I just happen to be sweating a bunch that day for, I don't know why. My body just decides it wants to sweat a lot. And you can wear what you want to wear now. It could be your little secret to confidence. These really should be in everyone's toiletry bag, whether you're having a big presentation or a date. You know, I haven't had to worry about that in a long time, because I've been with my wife for a long time. So thank goodness I don't have to worry about sweating on dates. But if you got to worry about that, Sweat Block could be the winning product for you that could help you have a really good date. Everyone can benefit from getting Sweat Block wipes. So if you want to get some for yourself, get it today for 20% off at sweatblock.com with promo code Locked On, or at Amazon and CVS.
And this episode is also brought to you by one of our all-time favorites. It's BetOnline, and it's that time of year again, and all eyes are now turning to football as teams are back on the gridiron to start the season. As always, BetOnline is your number one spot for all pro and college football action this year. Get all the updated odds, props, and contests, including online's biggest $500,000 NFL mega contest and the world's largest $200,000 NFL Survivor contest open now at BetOnline. Go to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive your 100% welcome bonus using our promo code Locked On. Be sure to take advantage of their opening day super promo. You make a bet on the Thursday, September 9th season opener between the Super Bowl champion Buccaneers and the Dallas Cowboys, and if you lose, your wager will be refunded up to $25 for new customers only when signing up and using promo code NFL100. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. From football, basketball, boxing, right to your favorite Vegas casino games, don't wait and take advantage of all the great offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. And Alex, a little later on in the show, we are going to be talking some BetOnline over-unders, but for now, a Mark Berman article on Mitchell Robinson raising some eyebrows. What were your takeaways from this piece, Alex?
Yeah, so Berman wrote about Mitch and his contract situation. I would say it was a pretty encouraging article to me from the perspective of like the Knicks looking to re-sign Robinson, which is good. It says, according to an NBA source, Knicks president Leon Rose is now open to a contract extension for the 23-year-old Robinson before the October 20th season opener, quote, as long as it's not crazy. What is crazy? Well, that would be, they consider Robert Williams' $54 million 4-year contract to be a little too lucrative. And apparently their ideal number is somewhere in the 4-year, $44 million range. I mean, that doesn't seem too crazy to me. There is fair, worries about Mitch's health right now. Now, Mitch might also look at that and say, well, I'm going to prove that my foot is totally fine. I'm going to get out there and I'm going to crush it this year. And then you guys are going to be forced to either pay me more next year or let me walk. So maybe that does happen. But as of right now, I think, maybe this is probably a little bit of posturing. So, 4 years, $44 million is probably what the Knicks wanted to get out there, is that potential contract number. Whereas, Mitch's camp probably wants more like the $54 million one that Robert Williams got. We're talking about a difference of $2.5 million a season at that point. So it's not that big of a bridge to cross here, where we could potentially see maybe like a 4-year, $50 million contract extension, or 4 for 48 or something like that. Something just a little more for Mitch. That's still not quite what Robert Williams got. I think that could be in the realm of possibility, or maybe where the Knicks even come close to maxing out the amount that they can give to Mitch, which I don't think that on an extension they could give him quite as much as what Williams got anyway, thanks to CBA rules. I think they'd be limited to I forget what the high water number is, but it's something like $14 million a season or something like that, which I guess I would almost get them there. I think that gets you to what? I guess if they could get to $14 million, that would allow them to give him as much. So maybe it's like $12 million or something. I don't know. I need to phone a friend and get Jeremy Cohen in here to explain to me how much Mitch can make again. But anyway, Gavin, that's the main takeaway. I love Berman, but a couple questionable basketball takes in here that he always has to mix in, like that Robinson has. What was the exact quote here? It was, Robinson, who started when healthy, wasn't too durable. That's fair. The past 2 seasons, and isn't blessed with a high basketball IQ. I don't know how you watch how Mitch plays defense and think that he doesn't have a high basketball IQ, but whatever. Anyway, strictly in terms of reporting on numbers and stuff, and Knicks thinking. I found this piece to be really encouraging. And Berman has, I think, been really on the nose as far as his sourcing and his ability to like get scoops in the recent months. So I feel pretty good about this after this article. But how are you feeling, Gavin, after reading it?
Yeah, I feel as if that $44 million number. I mean, if I know Mitch is on his sixth agent, so hopefully this guy's a good one. But I would tell him you never take that. You're getting that. Maybe not if he like tore his Achilles or something and missed the entire year. But even if he missed significant time this year, I think there is a team out there that would offer him that kind of money. And look, sometimes you're irrationally high on your own guys, right? Like I'm kind of shocked that Frank Ntilikina isn't on a team right now, and maybe that should tell me something about how I'm evaluating Knicks objectively or subjectively relative to the rest of the NBA. But I think if Mitch even is just as good as he was last year over a 70-game season, that's worth to me more than $11 million, or at the very least $11 million. But I think what ultimately defines how much he gets paid will be if he's healthy come playoff time, and then how he performs in the playoffs. And this is what we went over and over again this offseason, so I won't belabor the point. But if he proves to be that rare center that can stay on the floor for 30-plus minutes a game and not hurt you defensively, not hurt you offensively, and take advantage if you're going to switch smalls on him or go really, really tiny on the back end defensively, then he is worth somewhere in that range of 14 to 17 to 18 million dollars a year, depending on just how dominant he is on the defensive end. But this is sort of a fascinating game of chicken that I think the Knicks have tied themselves into to some extent, and maybe it'll pay off for them and they'll get a good contract, and or maybe they'll get burned. I don't know where you're at on it at this point, Alex. I'm still leaning slightly more towards this could end with the Knicks getting burned and Mitch on another team excelling.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess it just depends on how good his new agent is at his job. He signed with Wasserman Sports now, which I don't really know what their deal is. I mean, I know that Mitch had some like agents that were a little more small time before. You know, they were like sole proprietor type agents, and then has kind of switched his representation a number of times now, probably with this very moment in mind. So hopefully he settled on the right agent here to get him the deal that he wants. I mean, I kind of feel like, I don't know. It's tough to say. Like, I definitely think he's shown a lot more than Robert Williams at this point in his career. Like, contrary to what any Celtics fan would tell you, that they're like equal or that Williams is better or whatever. I think that Mitch has definitely shown more than him at this point and would deserve a bigger contract. The thing is, the injury is so weird. Like, I feel like Mitch's representation might say to him, like, they're probably going to take a judge of his health prior to the season. Prior to that extension deadline, the Knicks will probably have something on the table ready to sign if he wants to sign it. And it'll be up to him if he wants to put his name on the dotted line or not. And whether they hold strong at that like 4 for 44 number, or maybe they up it to like 4 for 48, which would be 12 million a season, something like that. Maybe they offer that contract to him, and maybe he says, hey, maybe he and his agent privately say like, hey, I'm not, this injury recovery has been really tough. I'm not 100% on how I'm going to look this year. Blah, blah, blah. And, maybe we should just take this, and take the guaranteed money versus risking another injury this year. Because I think if he would suffer another injury this year that would make him miss significant time, he's not going to get anything in double digit millions next summer. I don't think, I just think at that point, then he'll just get labeled as an injury prone player, fair or not, despite the fact that some of the injuries that he's had have been kind of freak injuries, like the broken hand this year made him miss a lot of time. And, the real injury that is concerning is the broken foot. But, we'll have to see how that goes. It's also going to be interesting to see, and this is a totally different subject, but it's going to be interesting to see this year how Mitch plays with the added weight that he's put on, because he's now reportedly, if you believe Mitch and his numbers that he's putting up, on like Snapchat and whatever and Instagram, apparently he's like 275 pounds now or something like that, which is great. Honestly, I mean, he should it's great that he is able to put on that mass and is so bulky now, because that was something that we were worried about for ages, dating back to his rookie season. We were like pondering, like, is Mitch always just going to be this like lanky dude, kind of like Nerlens Noel, or is he going to be able to actually pack on muscle? And it looks like Mitch has really packed on a lot of muscle and mass now to help him in the post against, the bigger guys like the Embiids and the Vucevic's and the Jokic's of the world. So, it should be a good thing for him, but it's going to be interesting to see the balancing act between, what's too much weight for his foot, because we've seen, bigger bigs like Yao Ming, for example. I mean, this was ages ago. Medicine's gotten better since then, but like Yao Ming essentially had his career ended by the same injury that Mitch just suffered. And Yao was a big guy, like a really big guy. So, but then we've also seen like Brook Lopez, who's also, a very solidly built center who has recovered from it and is thriving late in his career now. So, it's just a wait and see thing. As far as just the contract, I would be willing to bet that if Mitch feels healthy, ultimately the decision is on Mitch, regardless of what his agent says to him. And his agent can only give him advice. His agent can't make the decision for him. Like, it's not like he has power of attorney over what contract he signs. So it is up to Mitch to ultimately say, yes, I will do it, based off how he's been talking lately about how big of a season he thinks he's going to have. That he feels like he's in the best shape of his life, that he could potentially win Defensive Player of the Year this year, all this other stuff. I think he might end up waiting until next summer. And as you said, maybe that ends up burning the Knicks. Maybe it just ends up, being a situation where the Knicks say, all right, cool, like, you earned it, like, here's a contract. They did do that this year with like Nerlens Noel, for example, who none of us expected to get the contract that he did, but he did from the Knicks because they said, we're going to reward you for having a really good season. So clearly they're not against that. They're not against the idea of paying someone who's earned it. So I don't know. It'll be intriguing to keep an eye on going forward here. But speaking of things to keep an eye on going forward, maybe you've been keeping an eye on your car and you need to get some parts for it because you noticed something, wrong with it. And that brings me to the point that this episode is brought to you by rockauto.com. And of course, if you've worked on your car before, the worst part of working on your car is going to that brick and mortar auto parts store, talking to the guy at the counter, having them order you a stupidly expensive part because it's the one that they happen to carry and that makes them the most money. And they're giving you a higher rate because you're not a mechanic. You're just, someone off the street. They're going to charge you probably like 1.5 times more than what they would charge a mechanic walking in the door. Then on top of it, they don't have it in stock. They ask you all these other questions about your car that like are not pertinent to the situation when you come in just with one part on your mind. And it's just not a fun experience. You have to then like come back to their store later to pick up your part. No good. It's the worst part of doing home repairs on your car is going and having to buy the part. The best part now for me, and soon for you if you decide to take advantage of this, is just going on rockauto.com and getting it delivered right to your door for the lowest possible price. You don't have to deal with, the pushy salespeople. You don't have to deal with the, all the other crap that comes with going into one of those stores. You just log on to rockauto.com and then you save, up to 30%, 50%, even 100% less than what the competition is offering. You're going to save like tons and tons of money by going to rockauto.com and, dealing with them instead of dealing with those salespeople. On top of it, Rock Auto is a family business. They've been serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. So that they're interested in making sure that you get the parts that you need and are not pushed around on the way there. So if you want to see what's available for your car or truck, go to rockauto.com right now. And if you decide to pick up a part for your car or truck, right, Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com.
David Harrison here, the Locked On Washington Football Team podcast, celebrating with you a 21 grain salute to a less boring sandwich thanks to Dave's Killer Bread. I don't know about you guys, but when I eat pizza, I eat it for the toppings, not the crust. And when I eat a sandwich, it's for what's inside the bread, not for the bread. But when I throw a sandwich on 21 whole grains and seeds, thin sliced bread from Dave's Killer Bread, it is the epitome of addition by subtraction. That thin sliced bread lets me focus on what's inside the sandwich, but also adds to the sandwich with killer taste, killer texture, killer nutrition, a subtle sweetness, and a seed-coated crust. Dave's Killer Bread is America's #1 organic bread for a reason. It tastes so stinking good. Dave's Killer Bread is made with the highest quality organic and non-GMO ingredients and is power-packed with whole grains, fiber, and protein. Visit daveskillerbread.com to learn more and look for Dave's Killer Bread in the bread aisle of your local grocery store.
All right, and we're back for our third and final segment. And Gavin, we we mentioned that they're a sponsor earlier, but we decided to log on to betonline.ag, which if you log on and use promo code Locked On, you can get up to 100% deposit bonus, which is great to bet on some of these Knicks things. And I think the big one that's been the highest topic or whatever source of contention with Knicks fans has been the wins total for the Knicks. Their over-under is 42.5. So I don't know. How do you feel about that? Like, do you think this is too low? Do you think it's about right? Too high? I certainly know what I feel, and I think I know. I think I know what you're going to say, and there's a reason why it's under contention specifically from Knicks fans. But what do you think about that over/under total?
Yeah, so I think it's I don't know. I don't find it offensive, but at the same time, I think it's a great bet, and I think it's a chance for all of us in Knicks Nation to make some money. The Knicks played at a 56 win pace in games that Derrick Rose participated in, 24-11 over his 35 games. They played at a 47 win pace, just flat out over the season, despite Rose obviously not being on the team initially and then missing a bunch of time in the middle of the year due to COVID, and Rose, again, arguably their second most important player, despite the fact that RJ Barrett at the beginning of the season was not who RJ Barrett was at the end of the season, despite that being true for Reggie Bullock, despite Julius Randle sort of being worn down by workload. And now you're telling me that same team that loses the human body weight, Elfrid Payton, and replaces him with Kemba Walker, and loses Reggie Bullock, who was an integral piece, but replaces him with a much more versatile offensive player and just flat out more talented offensive player in Evan Fournier, and gets back presumably, as we were just discussing, healthy Mitchell Robinson, who played less than half of last season. Despite the fact that the entirety of the Eastern Conference has improved in turn, I fail to see how that team is 5 games worse next year outside of worse injury luck. And that's the one thing that you could sort of use as a counterweight to this entire argument. It's that despite Mitch being hurt a lot, despite Rose missing a lot of games, RJ Barrett played the entire season. Julius Randle missed, 1 game the whole year, 2 games the whole year. This was a team that had remarkable availability from 2 of their top 3 players. And adds a guy in Kemba Walker who also has a long history of being hurt. I would argue that is offset by improvements from Emmanuel Quickley, the fact that you have Walker and Rose, and in all likelihood should have one of them for the vast majority of your games, and the games you have 2. That's just a whole lot of talent in the backcourt. Guys like Julius Randle and RJ Barrett just don't have a significant injury history throughout their career. They've proven to be extremely durable. And even someone like Mitchell Robinson didn't really have much of an injury history, played over 80% of his games the 2 seasons before this past one. So I don't know. I have faith that this team will, and maybe I'll get smacked in the face right away and someone will get severely hurt right off the bat. That would be the Knicksiest thing to happen. But I don't know. I have faith that this team will stay relatively healthy. And Alex, I have faith that, especially with guys like Deuce McBride and Quentin Grimes showing real flashes in Summer League, they have the depth to survive some injuries. So as long as things aren't catastrophic, I don't know about you. I kind of fail to see how they hit the under here and win less than 43 games.
Yeah, I don't see it either. I mean, things would have to go really catastrophically wrong. And like to your point with RJ and Randall's durability too, like both of those guys, neither of them really play a high flying vertical brand of basketball. Where, there is always that lingering fear in your mind of like, oh, but, the injury is right around the corner. It's like when you watch, like like guys that I watch where I'm like, I feel like they're going to have a injury at some point in their career is like Ja Morant, like stands out to me. Like guys like that are just like Ja Morant every game probably makes Grizzly fans hold their breath like 3 times because he always tries to do these like crazy poster dunks, and like is always like 10 feet in the air and, doing all this stuff. And it's like, oh man, all it's going to take is like one player to accidentally take his legs out and he's going to like land on his back or something or land weird on his knee or, whatever. And it's just not going to be pretty. Randall and RJ don't play like that at all. They play pretty ground bound. Like RJ, for all of his athletic gifts, which I think he has plenty, he doesn't, it's not like he's throwing down tons of dunks every game or anything like that. Or, even doing anything that requires him getting particularly high up in the air. Like even his jumper, he doesn't get super high up and around the basket, he tends to just kind of bully his way in rather than getting super vertical. So, I think that he's going to continue to be durable. I think Randall, same difference. They play very, in that respect, they play very similar where neither of their game is really predicated on like elite leaping athleticism and stuff. So I see that holding up. I think that I've said this before. I think having Derrick Rose on his team might actually help Kemba Walker out a decent amount. If he can relay some of those like workout stretching routines that he does prior to the game that have helped extend his knee life. Maybe he can do that for Kemba as well and offer him, some help with that. And, maybe that'll help Kemba stay healthy. But no matter what, I think the biggest thing that'll help Kemba stay healthy is the fact that, as you said, the Knicks do have the depth to occasionally give him a rest night, even though Tibbs joked that there would be no rest nights for Kemba. I'm sure the front office will put their foot down and say, hey, Kemba says he needs a couple rest nights every once in a while. Like, give him to him, play Deuce McBride a couple minutes, give Quickly a little run at the point guard, whatever. Like, do what you got to do, But even on a good night, Kemba might max out at like 30 minutes and Derrick Rose at like 25. And that'll be pretty good for them, I think, as far as health is concerned. And then, you obviously have to consider like the health of the center trio as well. I think they should hold up well enough. Like if Mitch's foot is okay and healed properly, then I kind of push back on this like new narrative that he's super injury prone. I don't really think that's the case. Like I alluded to it in the last segment, but like half of his injury time spent on the shelf this past year is a freak injury. Like a broken hand is not something that is likely to recur. And I don't think that's going to happen again. So, we'll see as far as how the foot's doing. But if the foot's okay, I think he'll be pretty good there. And if nothing else, they have Jericho Sims waiting in the wings too, who I think could provide some good minutes this year as a third string center. If one of those 3 that they already have signed would get hurt by some chance. Other than that, I think that they're definitely talented enough to win more than 43 games or more. I would, and I probably will place a bet saying that they are going to, they're going to hit over on that. I can't see them really winning any less than like 45 games or so, particularly when, like with what we opened the show with, they have some really favorable stretches in the beginning and the end of the season, which the beginning of the season, that will set the tone. So if they come out of that well, then that should give them the confidence and stuff that they need, confidence and rhythm and everything else that they need to go up against those juggernaut teams in the middle. And then they get a nice, easy schedule to end the year, which hopefully if they're still healthy and other teams aren't, at that point in the year, then they'll be able to win those games. And also, it's not going away anytime soon. Apparently, COVID protocols will probably still be in place. And, that was one thing that the Knicks did really well that last year, in addition to the fact that they just didn't get hurt a lot. They also didn't have very many players miss any time with COVID absences compared to some other teams that were just like decimated by it. So clearly the Knicks are pretty good at keeping those COVID protocols in check as well. So if/when there are still protocols, because the entire nation won't be vaccinated by the time the NBA season starts, then, I have faith in the Knicks to do well as far as that's concerned. But Gavin, what are some other what are some other bets, Knicks or otherwise, that stand out to you in these like NBA futures? I think there's some pretty interesting like team futures and player futures.
Yeah, there are a couple of different over-unders that stood out to me. I'll go through them real quick. The Bulls, I would pound the under 42.5. I think their offense is going to be awesome, but I don't think they're going to fit together all that well. That one I'm pretty confident in. And then if you head out to the Western Conference, there are another few that I feel really, really good about. New Orleans under 39.5. I actually might even like that one more than the Knicks over. That team, I actually really like Trey Murphy the third. I think that was an awesome pick, and he's going to be really, really good for them. But the rest of that roster just doesn't make a lot of sense, and they're going to be, I think, along with the Kings, who you can also pencil in for an under at, I think, what are the Kings at 36.5? I think those are going to be far and away the two worst defenses in the NBA. I have teams that aren't pretty clearly tanking this year. So I feel pretty good about those. One other one, Spurs over 28.5. I know the roster talent isn't that good, but they're the Spurs. I can't see them just being horrifically bad, especially if this is probably going to be Greg Popovich's last year. So that's one I like a little bit. I don't know, Alex, just going through these teams ones, were there any other ones that you were kind of into and caught your eye, or did you want to kind of pop over to some Knicks-centric bets? I'll throw in one more quickly. I could see, I'd be kind of surprised if the Pistons go under 25.5. I know Cade is going to be awesome, but that roster is still just ugly.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the team wins. I don't know. There weren't too many that are super intriguing.